The snap of metal echoed through the trees, cutting through the stillness of the early morning. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart slamming against my ribs. Something was struggling just off the trail, hidden by the undergrowth. Pushing aside the damp branches, I saw it. An adult raccoon, caught in a rusted steel trap. Its front paw was mangled, blood pooling beneath its trembling body. The animal's dark eyes locked onto mine, wide with terror and pain. "Damn it!" I muttered under my breath, glancing around. Someone had set this trap illegally. The raccoon let out a weak, guttural sound, a mix of a snarl and a whimper. It tried to pull free, but the jagged edges of the metal dug in deeper. I hesitated. Wild animals were unpredictable, and a wounded one could be deadly. But I couldn't just leave it there. Taking a deep breath, I crouched down, moving slowly. "Easy, buddy. I'm not gonna hurt you." My voice was low, almost a whisper. The raccoon didn't back away. It just watched me, breathing heavy, its small chest rising and falling in rapid bursts. My hands trembled as I reached for the trap. The mechanism was old but strong, rust corroding its edges. I grabbed a thick branch and jammed it into the spring. With a grunt, I pried it open. The moment the pressure released, the raccoon yanked its paw free, stumbling backward. Blood smeared the dirt beneath it. I expected it to bolt, but it just stood there, staring at me. Not running, not attacking, just watching. "Go on," I urged, nodding toward the trees. For a moment, it didn't move. Then, slowly, it turned and limped toward the underbrush, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. I exhaled, wiping sweat from my brow. I should have felt relief. I had done the right thing. But as I straightened up, glancing at the spot where the raccoon had vanished, a chill crawled up my spine. That look in its eyes, it wasn't just fear or pain. It was something else, something I couldn't shake. The next morning, I stepped onto my porch with a coffee in hand, still groggy from sleep. The cool air smelled of damp earth, and birds chirped in the distance. I took a sip and stretched, ready to shake off the stiffness of the night. Then I saw it. A dead snake lay on the wooden planks, motionless, its body curled unnaturally. Its scales were dark, slick with something that made my stomach churn. Blood. My gut tightened as I stepped closer. The head was crushed almost deliberately. I frowned. Snakes weren't uncommon in these parts. But this felt wrong. I glanced around, scanning the tree line beyond my yard. Nothing. Just the usual rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. But an uneasy feeling settled in my chest. Was this some kind of sick prank? Did a predator kill it and just leave it here? Or was it something else? I shook my head. No point in overthinking. I grabbed a shovel from the side of the house, scooped up the snake, and tossed it into the woods. Out of sight, out of mind. But as I turned back toward my door, a flicker of movement caught my eye. There, at the edge of the forest, just beyond where the morning light faded into shadow, two small, gleaming eyes watched me. The raccoon. My breath hitched. It was the same one. I knew it. The same size, the same piercing gaze. Its injured paw was lifted slightly off the ground, but it wasn't running. It wasn't scared. It was just watching. A shiver ran down my spine. I took a slow step forward, and the raccoon tilted its head, almost as if it was expecting something. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. What the hell was I supposed to say? Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the raccoon turned and disappeared into the trees. I exhaled, feeling my pulse in my throat. This was just a coincidence. A damn animal. That's all. And yet, as I stepped inside and locked the door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just missed something important, something I was supposed to understand. The following morning, I hesitated before opening my front door. Yesterday's snake incident had left me on edge, and I wasn't eager to find another surprise waiting for me. But when I finally stepped outside, my stomach dropped. Lying on the porch was a dead bird. A small sparrow, twisted and stiff, its feathers ruffled, beak slightly open. A few feet away, my old work hat was torn nearly in half, the fabric shredded as if something had gnawed on it. "What the hell?" I muttered, glancing around. The woods were silent. Too silent. No birds, no rustling leaves. Just an eerie, heavy stillness. I bent down, my fingers hovering over the bird. It didn't look like a natural predator had gotten to it. There were no bite marks, no missing parts. Just lifeless, like it had been placed there. I turned, scanning the edge of the trees, expecting to see those familiar glowing eyes staring back. But the raccoon was nowhere in sight. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to shake it off. Animals did weird things, right? Maybe the wind blew the bird onto the porch. Maybe some stray dog had gotten hold of my hat. Maybe I was just being paranoid. That night, I was almost asleep when a noise jolted me awake. A sharp thud against the side of the house. Then another. My pulse spiked. I sat up, straining to listen. Silence. Then scratching. Faint but deliberate. Something was moving around outside. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand and slowly moved toward the window. Peeling back the curtain, I swept the beam across the yard. A shadow darted across the porch. I barely caught it, but I knew. I knew what it was. I flung the door open, stepping onto the porch, but by the time I aimed the flashlight toward the woods, the figure was already gone. My heart pounded. This wasn't normal behavior. This wasn't a random animal scavenging for food. This was something else. And for the first time, I felt a creeping sense of dread. That raccoon, it wasn't just watching me. It was testing me. By the time I met up with some friends later that day, I was already regretting bringing up the raccoon. "Dude, are you serious? A raccoon is messing with you?" Mike chuckled, shaking his head. "No, it's not just that," I insisted. It's like it knows me. It left a snake on my porch, a dead bird, and last night— Wait, Jason interrupted, grinning. "Are you saying a raccoon is stalking you?" The whole table burst into laughter. Even Rachel, the one who usually took me seriously, smirked behind her beer. I clenched my jaw. "Forget it." "No, come on, man." Mike wiped a tear from his eye. "You're telling me this thing is, what, hunting you? Planning your demise?" "I'm saying something weird is going on." Jason leaned in, lowering his voice mockingly. "Maybe it's a ghost raccoon. Maybe you saved its spirit, and now it's bound to you forever." More laughter. I pushed back my chair. "I gotta go." "Ah, don't be mad," Rachel called after me. But I was already walking out the door. By the time I got home, the sun was setting, and my irritation had settled into exhaustion. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was blowing this out of proportion. Maybe I just needed sleep. I stepped onto my porch and reached for the doorknob, then froze. The door was open. A cold wave of adrenaline shot through me. I was sure I'd locked it before I left. I pushed it open wider, my pulse pounding in my ears. Inside, my living room was a mess. Papers scattered across the floor, couch cushions torn apart, my kitchen drawers left half open, utensils spilling out like someone had rifled through them in a hurry. My first thought was a break-in, a burglar, but then I noticed something else. Near the kitchen sink, tiny muddy footprints, leading to the counter, and sitting right there, in the middle of the mess, was my missing work hat. The same one that had been torn apart on the porch yesterday. Only now it was perfectly intact. Couldn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house made my skin prickle. Every gust of wind outside sounded like something moving in the darkness. My mind kept circling back to the footprints, the door left ajar, the untouched hat. I needed answers. The next morning, I went into town and bought a cheap motion-activated camera. If something or someone was sneaking into my house, I was going to catch them. I set it up just inside the living room, facing the front door, then spent the evening forcing myself to act normal. Watching TV, scrolling through my phone, pretending I wasn't waiting. By midnight, exhaustion won. I locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and finally collapsed into bed. The next morning, I woke up feeling uneasy. Nothing had woken me in the night, but that didn't mean nothing had happened. With my heart pounding, I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the footage. First, nothing. Hours of stillness. the occasional flicker of headlights from passing cars. Then, at 3:14 a.m., the front door creaked open. My stomach tightened. A shadow slipped inside. Small, low to the ground. The raccoon. I leaned closer to the screen, barely breathing. It limped into the living room, its injured paw raised slightly off the ground. But it wasn't moving like an animal scavenging for food. It wasn't sniffing around, knocking things over. It had a purpose. It went straight to the couch, climbed onto it, dug between the cushions like it was looking for something specific. Then, after a few minutes, it dropped back to the floor and padded toward the kitchen. It stopped at the counter, stood on its hind legs, stared at the cabinets, and then it looked directly at the camera. A chill ran through me. For a long moment, it didn't move, just stared. Then, as if deciding something, it turned and walked calmly out the front door. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't losing my mind. That raccoon was coming into my house for a reason, and I needed to figure out what the hell it was looking for. I wasn't going to sit back and let a damn raccoon treat my house like its personal storage unit. If it wanted to keep sneaking in, I was going to stop it. That night, I stayed up, lights off, watching the front door like a hawk. My body was tense, my heartbeat slow but heavy. Every creak in the house had me gripping the armrest of my chair tighter. Then, around 3 a.m., I saw movement on the porch, a shadow gliding low to the ground. It hesitated at the door, sniffing, cautious. I lunged. The chair crashed behind me as I bolted forward, flinging the door open. The raccoon whipped around, its injured paw barely slowing it down as it bolted into the trees. I ran after it, bare feet slamming against the damp earth. Branches clawed at my arms as I pushed forward, my breath sharp and ragged. The raccoon was fast, too fast for something that had supposedly been injured. I nearly lost it in the underbrush, but then I saw it stop. Just for a second, just long enough to glance back at me. And then, it vanished, slipping between the trees like a ghost. I stood there panting, hands on my knees, heart hammering against my ribs. My yard was silent again, except for the distant sound of wind through the branches. I had no idea where it had gone, but I knew one thing: it was playing with me. Frustrated, I turned and stalked back to the house. On the way, I passed the old rusted trap, the same one I had pried open days ago to free that damn raccoon. Something twisted in my chest. Without thinking, I bent down and yanked it out of the dirt. No more traps, no more injured animals. If some asshole was still setting them up out here, I'd make sure they never found this one again. I tossed it onto my porch and went inside, locking the door behind me. The next morning, as I stepped outside, something caught my eye. The trap I had taken the night before, it was closed, and inside it, perfectly placed, was my old wristwatch, the one I had lost almost a year ago. I stood there, staring at the lifeless raccoon in the trap, my mind struggling to process everything. The hunting camp, the rusted metal, the smell of death. The raccoon I had saved hadn't been tormenting me. It had been leading me here, my fingers clenched into fists. Someone had set these traps. Someone had left them here, forgotten, waiting to snap shut on anything unfortunate enough to step too close. And this raccoon, it had seen it happen. It had lost something, maybe a mate, maybe its sibling, maybe just another one of its kind. The realization burned in my chest. It hadn't been testing me. It had been trying to tell me. I turned to look at it, standing just beyond the mess of discarded hunting gear. Its dark eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt understanding. I crouched down, exhaling slowly. I get it now. The raccoon didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there waiting. I reached forward and grabbed the nearest trap. With one swift motion, I hurled it into the trees. Then another, and another. One by one, I tossed them far away into the thickest part of the woods, where no hunter would ever find them again. By the time I was finished, sweat dripped down my forehead, my breath coming in hard bursts. I turned back to where the raccoon had been. It was gone. I scanned the trees, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing. No rustling, no parting branches. Just empty forest stretching in every direction. A strange sense of finality settled over me. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see it again. Maybe it had gotten what it needed. Maybe it had been waiting for someone to listen. As I stepped away from the abandoned camp, my foot hit something small and hard. I looked down. There, half buried in the dirt, was a spent shotgun shell. Old but recent enough to hold onto its color. Someone had been here, and not too long ago. I picked it up, turning it between my fingers. My chest tightened. This wasn't over. I pocketed the shell and started walking back home, the forest silent around me. Somewhere behind me, unseen, I had the strange feeling that something was still watching.